Hello and welcome to Nighttime Science. Close your eyes, let your shoulders drop, unclench your jaw, let the tension drain out of your body, flowing down through your arms, through your legs, and into the ground beneath you. You are safe. You are still. You are about to embark on a journey that is not measured in minutes or hours or even years. We are going to travel through deep time. A time so vast, so slow, and so quiet that the noise of the modern world will simply fade away, like a morning mist burning off under a gentle sun. We are here to explore the science of evolution, but not the frantic, fast-paced evolution of action movies or dramatic documentaries. We are here to explore the slow drift, the imperceptible changes that accumulate over millions and billions of years to shape the world we know today. Evolution is not a sprint. It is a glacier, moving with a slowness that is almost impossible to comprehend. It is a process of immense patience. And tonight we will match that patience. We will take our time. We will look closely at the details. We will find comfort in the sheer magnitude of the history that lies behind us. Before we see the first life, we must see the stage. Imagine the Earth. Not as it is now, covered in green forests and blue oceans, but as it was 4.5 billion years ago. There was no sound, for there was no air to carry it in the way we understand. There were no ears to hear it. There was only the silence of space and the slow, heavy gravity of a forming planet. 4.5 billion. Let that number sit in your mind. If you were to count to 4.5 billion, saying one number every second, it would take you over 140 years. That is just the count. The reality of that time is a vast, empty ocean of years. In this beginning, the Earth was molten, a sphere of glowing rock spinning in the dark. It was a time of heat, but also a time of cooling. Slowly, very slowly, the heat began to radiate out into the void. The surface of the planet began to crust over. Imagine the skin of a cooling pudding, or the wax of a candle hardening as the flame dies down. This was the formation of the crust, dark basaltic rock solidifying over a churning hot interior. For millions of years, this was the only action: the cooling, the hardening, the slow turning of the sphere. As the planet cooled, gases trapped inside the rock were released. Steam, carbon dioxide, nitrogen. They rose up from the surface, forming a heavy, thick atmosphere. It was not an atmosphere you could breathe. It was a blanket of gray and white, trapping the heat, swirling in slow, silent storms. And then it rained. It did not rain for an hour or a day or a week. It rained for millions of years. The steam in the atmosphere condensed as the planet cooled further. Giant clouds, thick and heavy, unburdened themselves. The water fell onto the hot rocks, sizzling at first, turning back to steam, rising and falling again. Over eons, the rocks cooled enough for the water to stay. Puddles formed, then ponds, then lakes, and finally a global ocean. A vast olive-green ocean rich with dissolved iron covering almost the entire planet. There were no waves crashing on a sandy beach because there were no continents yet. Just a few volcanic islands poking through the surface of the dark water. The moon, much closer then than it is now, pulled at this global ocean, creating massive tides that swept around the planet in a rhythm that would continue for billions of years. High tide, low tide, high tide, low tide, the heartbeat of the young Earth. This period is called the Archean Eon. The word Archean comes from the ancient Greek for beginning or origin. It is a time of simplicity, a time of waiting. The days were shorter then, the planet spun faster, but the years stretched out endlessly. In this warm, chemical-rich ocean, something extraordinary happened. We do not know the exact moment. We do not know the exact mechanism. But somewhere in the depths, or perhaps in a shallow pool on the edge of a volcano, chemistry became biology. Molecules began to replicate. Complex chains of carbon and hydrogen found a way to copy themselves. These were the first single-celled organisms, prokaryotes, simple microscopic sacs of fluid containing the basic instructions for life. They had no nucleus. They had no complex organs. They simply existed. They drifted in the currents. They absorbed nutrients from the water around them. They divided. 1 became 2, 2 became 4, 4 became 8. This process was slow. There was no competition. There were no predators. There was just the gentle drift of life in a mineral sea. For 1 billion years, this was the dominant form of life on Earth. If you were to travel back in time to this era, you would see nothing but water and rock. The water would look muddy, perhaps slightly reddish or greenish. You would not see fish. You would not see seaweed. You would see only the silence of the microbial world. But down at the microscopic level, a revolution was brewing. A slow, quiet revolution that would change the color of the sky and the chemistry of the oceans. Let us drift forward in time now, slowly, moving through the millions of years as if they were pages in a very thick book. We are approaching the mark of 2.4 billion years ago. We are entering the Proterozoic eon. The word Proterozoic means earlier life. In the shallow waters where the sunlight penetrated the gloom, a new type of bacteria had evolved. These were the cyanobacteria. Sometimes we call them blue-green algae, although they are not true algae. They are bacteria, tiny microscopic beads of life. These cyanobacteria had developed a remarkable ability. They could harvest the light of the sun. Inside their tiny bodies, they had developed a chemical machinery, chlorophyll, that allowed them to take water and carbon dioxide and, using the energy from the sun, turn it into food. Sugar. This process is called photosynthesis. It is a word we all know, but let us pause to consider the magic of it. It is the ability to eat light, to take the massless photons streaming from a star 93 million miles away and turn them into the solid matter of a living body. But photosynthesis had a byproduct, a waste product. As the cyanobacteria broke apart the water molecules to get the hydrogen they needed, they released the oxygen. Oxygen. To us, oxygen is the breath of life. It is the fuel that keeps our hearts beating and our brains thinking. But to the life of the Archean Earth, oxygen was a poison. The early bacteria were anaerobic. They lived without air. Oxygen was toxic to them. It burned their cellular machinery. So when the cyanobacteria first began to puff out these tiny bubbles of oxygen, the world did not change immediately. The Earth has a way of absorbing changes, dampening them, slowing them down. The oxygen released by the cyanobacteria dissolved into the ocean water. There it met the dissolved iron. The early oceans were rich in iron, remnants of the volcanic Earth. When the oxygen met the iron, a chemical reaction occurred. Oxidation, rust. The iron in the ocean turned into rust particles. These tiny particles were heavy. They slowly sank down through the water column. Down, 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 settling on the ocean floor. Layer upon layer, year upon year, century upon century, millennium upon millennium. This was a snowfall of rust, a silent underwater sedimentation that lasted for hundreds of millions of years. Today we can see the evidence of this slow process. We call them banded iron formations. If you look at these rocks in places like Australia or Minnesota, you see beautiful stripes. Red bands of iron oxide alternating with gray bands of shale or chert. These bands are the fossilized rhythm of the early Earth. They represent the seasons or the cycles of bacterial blooms laid down over eons. Imagine standing on the shore of that ancient ocean. The water is red, stained with rust. The sky above is not blue, but likely a hazy orange or pink due to the methane in the atmosphere. The sun is a little dimmer than it is today, and all around you is silence. No birds calling, no wind rustling through trees, just the sound of the water lapping against the bare, rocky shore. And in the water, the stromatolites. Stromatolites are the great monuments of this era. They are not buildings made by hands, but structures made by time and bacteria. Cyanobacteria form sticky mats on the shallow sea floor. They trap sand and sediment. As the sediment covers them, they grow upward, seeking the light. Layer by layer, fraction of a millimeter by fraction of a millimeter, they build mounds, columns, domes. Some of these stromatolites grew to be thigh-high or even taller. Vast fields of them like stone mushrooms stretching out into the shallow water. They were the cities of the Proterozoic, quiet, motionless, growing at a pace that makes a snail look like a race car. A stromatolite might grow only a few centimeters in 100 years. For over 1 billion years, these bacterial colonies were the most complex life on Earth. They dominated the shallows. They pumped out oxygen bubble by tiny bubble. Eventually, the iron in the oceans was used up. The rust stopped falling. The oceans became clear. But the cyanobacteria kept working. They kept photosynthesizing. They kept releasing oxygen. Now, with no iron to soak it up, the oxygen began to bubble out of the water. It rose up into the atmosphere. It began to displace the methane and the other gases. This was the Great Oxidation Event. It sounds dramatic, like an explosion, but it was the slowest catastrophe in history. It took millions of years for the atmosphere to change. As the oxygen levels rose, the methane, a powerful greenhouse gas, was destroyed. The Earth grew cold, very cold. A massive ice age, the Huronian glaciation, gripped the planet, the snowball Earth. For millions of years, the planet may have been covered in ice from pole to pole. The silence deepened. The white ice reflected the sun. The life in the oceans huddled in the few pockets of liquid water that remained. But life is resilient. It waits. It endures. The volcanoes continued to erupt, punching through the ice, releasing carbon dioxide, warming the planet slowly back up. The ice melted. The cycle continued. And in this new oxygen-rich world, a new possibility emerged. Oxygen is a powerful fuel. It allows for high-energy chemical reactions. The anaerobic bacteria retreated to the deep mud where oxygen could not reach them, where they still live today. In their place, organisms that could use oxygen began to thrive. The stage was set for complexity. The stage was set for the eukaryotic cell. We are now drifting towards a moment roughly 1.8 billion years ago. The oceans are oxygenated. The sky is turning a familiar shade of blue. The days are still shorter than 24 hours, but the rhythm of the planet is steady. In this microscopic world, another profound event occurred. It is perhaps the most important cooperation in the history of life. It is the story of endosymbiosis. Imagine a large, single-celled organism. It is a predator of sorts, engulfing smaller bacteria to eat them. It moves through the water, enveloping food with its flexible membrane. One day, this large cell engulfs a smaller bacterium. But this smaller bacterium is special. It has evolved a way to use oxygen to generate huge amounts of energy. Usually, the large cell would digest the small one. It would break it down for parts, but this time something different happens. The digestion fails. The small bacterium survives inside the large one. And they strike a deal, a truce, a partnership. The small bacterium, safe inside the larger cell, produces energy. It takes nutrients from the host and uses oxygen to burn them, creating ATP, the chemical battery of life. It produces so much energy that it gives the surplus to the host. The large host cell, in return, provides protection. It provides a steady supply of food. It provides a stable environment. They begin to live together. Symbiosis means living together. Over generations, thousands, millions of generations, they become inseparable. The small bacterium loses its ability to live outside the host. It becomes an organelle. It becomes the mitochondrion. If you take a deep breath right now, breathe in slowly, and breathe out, you are using the descendants of that ancient bacterium. Every cell in your body except your red blood cells contains mitochondria. They are the power plants of your existence. They still have their own tiny loop of DNA, separate from your main human DNA. It is a fossil record of their time as free-living bacteria carried inside you, passed down from your mother and her mother and her mother all the way back to that ancient ocean. This merger changed everything. With the power of mitochondria, cells could grow larger. They could become more complex. They could gather together to form colonies. Multicellular life began to stir. It didn't happen overnight. For hundreds of millions of years, life remained small. Simple algae, slime molds. But the potential was there. The energy was there. Let us move forward again. The pages of time are turning faster now, though still glacially slow by our standards. We are reaching 800 million years ago, 600 million years ago, the Ediacaran period. This is a strange and dreamlike time. The life forms of the Ediacaran are unlike anything alive today. They were soft-bodied creatures. There were no shells, no teeth, no bones. Imagine the seafloor covered in soft quilted mats. Creatures shaped like fronds or discs or bags. They didn't swim. They didn't hunt. They simply lay on the sand or stood anchored in the mud, absorbing nutrients from the water. They were peaceful creatures. There were no predators. It was the Garden of Ediacara, a quiet, slow-moving world where the only action was the gentle swaying of a frond in the current. Some of these creatures, like Dickinsonia, were flat, oval shapes that could grow up to a meter long. They would slowly creep over the bacterial mats, digesting the bacteria underneath them, leaving a footprint behind as they moved on. It was a world of silence and softness, a world of drift. But the quiet of the Ediacaran was about to be broken. A new invention was coming. The invention of the mouth, the invention of the gut, the invention of the eye. We are arriving at the Cambrian explosion 540 million years ago. The word explosion suggests a bang, a firework. But in geological terms, an explosion takes 20 million years. It is a slow blooming, a sudden biological creativity. In the Cambrian seas, the chemistry of the water changed again. Calcium carbonate became more available. Animals began to build armor. They began to build shells, spines, plates, and they began to see. The evolution of the eye is one of the most soothing progressions to contemplate. It started with a simple patch of light-sensitive cells, a freckle on the skin of a worm or a jellyfish. This patch could tell the difference between light and dark. It could tell if it was day or night. It could tell if a shadow, a predator, was passing overhead. But it could not form an image. Slowly, over thousands of generations, the patch of light-sensitive cells depressed. It formed a cup shape. This was a crucial improvement. A cup can tell you the direction of the light. If the light hits the right side of the cup, the creature knows the light is coming from the left. The cup deepened. The opening grew smaller. This created the pinhole camera effect. A sharp image could now be formed on the back of the retina. It was dim, but it was a picture. Finally, the skin over the opening became transparent. It thickened to form a lens. The lens could focus the light. It could make the image bright and sharp. In the Cambrian oceans, the trilobites looked out at the world with their crystal eyes. The Anomalocaris, a strange predator with grasping limbs, scanned the water for prey. Life had become watchful. But even in this new world of hunters and hunted, there were rhythms of rest. Even the simplest animals required downtime. Consider the jellyfish, the cnidarians. They evolved around this time or perhaps a bit earlier. They have no brain, They have no central processing unit. They are a nerve net, a floating bell of pulsing tissue. And yet, scientists have discovered that jellyfish sleep. At night, the Cassiopeia jellyfish, which spends its life upside down on the ocean floor, pulses less frequently. Its metabolic rate drops. It becomes less responsive to stimuli. If you poke it, it takes longer to react than it does during the day. If you keep it awake all night by poking it, it will be sluggish the next day. It will need to catch up on its sleep. This tells us something profound. Sleep is not just for the brain. Sleep is for the body. Sleep is a fundamental property of life, as ancient as the jellyfish, perhaps as ancient as the first cells. It is a time of repair, a time of resetting chemical balances, a time of quiet. So as we imagine the Cambrian seas teeming with trilobites and worms and swimming arthropods, we must also imagine the quiet moments. The moments when the Anomalocaris drifted into a crevice to rest. The moments when the trilobite curled up in the mud. The moments when the pulse of the jellyfish slowed to a gentle rhythm. Pulse. Pause. Pulse. Pause. The rhythm of life is the rhythm of rest. While the oceans were teeming with this new complex life, the land remained barren. For billions of years, the continents were empty rock and sand. The wind blew over vast deserts of red stone. Rain fell on lifeless mountains and washed sediment into the rivers unchecked by roots. But the green was coming. It started at the water's edge, a green scum on the rocks. Algae that had learned to tolerate the drying air for a few hours at low tide. Around 470 million years ago, the first true plants made the move. They were not trees. They were not even bushes. They were tiny, mosses, liverworts. They had no roots to drill into the rock. They had no wood to hold them up. They hugged the ground. They stayed in the damp shadows of rocks near the spray of the waterfalls. They created a thin green film on the surface of the planet. This was a slow conquest, inch by inch, spore by spore. These early plants had to solve a difficult problem: how to reproduce without water. In the ocean, sperm could swim to the egg. On land, the air was dry. The first plants still needed water for reproduction. They waited for the rain. When the raindrops fell, the microscopic sperm would swim through the film of water to find the egg. It was a precarious existence, a life lived waiting for the rain. But slowly, plants developed new tools. They developed a waxy cuticle, a skin, to keep the water inside their bodies. They developed stomata, tiny mouths on their leaves, that could open to let air in and close to keep water from escaping. And they developed vascular tissue, veins, tiny pipes that could carry water from the ground up to the top of the plant. With these veins, plants could grow taller. They could lift themselves off the hot ground. They could reach for the sun. By the Devonian period, around 390 million years ago, the first forests appeared. But these were not forests of oak or pine. They were forests of strange, alien shapes. Imagine the Watieza. It looked like a palm tree, but it was a fern. It stood 8 meters tall. It had no broad leaves, just fronds that looked like bottle brushes. Imagine the lepidodendron, the scale tree. It grew to be 50 meters tall. Its bark looked like reptile skin patterned with diamond scales. It did not have wood like a modern tree. It was supported by a thick, corky bark. It grew fast, sucked up carbon dioxide, and then fell over. These forests of the Carboniferous period were swampy, wet, and incredibly silent. There were no birds to sing, no squirrels to chatter, no monkeys to howl. There were insects, yes. Giant dragonflies with wingspans of 70 centimeters hummed through the damp air. Huge millipedes 2 meters long crawled through the rotting vegetation. But the background noise was the drip, drip, drip of water, the squelch of mud, the creaking of the giant fern trees in the wind. The air was thick with oxygen. The plants were pumping out so much oxygen that the levels reached 35%, much higher than the 21% of today. This high oxygen allowed the insects to grow to their giant sizes, as insects breathe through tiny tubes in their bodies, and more oxygen meant they could supply bigger bodies. But there was another key feature of these forests: wood. The trees had evolved a new substance: lignin. Lignin is the stiff structural material that makes wood hard. It allowed trees to grow tall. But when these first trees died and fell into the swamp, a strange thing happened. Nothing ate them. The bacteria and fungi of the time had not yet evolved the enzymes to digest lignin. It was too tough. So the dead trees just piled up. Layer upon layer of trunks, branches, and leaves accumulated in the stagnant water. They did not rot. They sank into the muck. Over millions of years, the weight of the layers above compressed the peat. The heat and pressure turned the dead plants into coal. The coal seams that power our world today are the fossilized remains of that silent green era. When we burn coal, we are releasing the sunlight that was captured by a lepidodendron 300 million years ago. We are releasing the carbon that was pulled from the ancient atmosphere in a time of giant insects and silent swamps. It is a form of chemical memory, a long sleep of the carbon atom waking up millions of years later. Within these forests, another crucial invention appeared: the seed. Before seeds, plants reproduced with spores. Spores are tiny and fragile. They need to land in a perfect wet spot to grow. They cannot wait. But a seed is a time capsule. A seed contains a baby plant, an embryo, and a supply of food, all wrapped in a tough protective coat. The seed allowed plants to travel. They could be carried by the wind. They could float on the water. But more importantly, the seed allowed plants to wait. Dormancy. A seed can fall to the ground and do nothing. It can wait for the rain. It can wait for the winter to pass. It can wait for years, sometimes centuries. There are seeds found in ancient storage jars, thousands of years old, that have been planted and have sprouted. The evolution of the seed introduced a new rhythm to the world: the rhythm of waiting, the rhythm of sleeping through the bad times to awake in the good times. This is a lesson the animals would soon learn as well. While the forests were rising, the animals were making their own slow transition. For millions of years, the vertebrates, animals with backbones, lived only in the water. Fish ruled the Devonian seas. There were armored fish, sharks, and lobe-finned fish. The lobe-finned fish were special. They had fleshy, muscular fins with bones inside them. Bones that correspond to our own humerus, radius, ulna. They lived in shallow, weed-choked waters. Perhaps it was the need to escape predators or the lure of unexploited food on the muddy banks that drove them. Meet Tiktaalik, the fishapod. Tiktaalik lived about 375 million years ago. It was a creature of the margins. It had scales and gills like a fish, but it also had a flat head like a crocodile. It had eyes on top of its skull for looking out of the water, and it had those sturdy, muscular fins. It could do a push-up. This seems like a small thing, but for a fish to lift its body off the substrate, to support its own weight against gravity, was a monumental step. Imagine Tiktaalik in the shallow, warm water. It pushes through the tangles of green plants. It props itself up on a mud bank. It takes a gulp of air. It looks at the strange green world of the land, and then it slides back into the water. It was not a sprint to the land. It was a slow drift, a venturing out and a returning. Over millions of years, the descendants of creatures like Tiktaalik spent more and more time on the mud. Their fins evolved into legs. Their swim bladders evolved into lungs. The amphibians had arrived, but the amphibians were still tethered to the water. Their skin was thin and permeable. If they dried out, they died. And their eggs were soft, jelly-like blobs that had to be laid in water. The early amphibians were large, slow creatures. Ariops was a bulky animal, 2 meters long, with a wide, toothy mouth. It lumbered through the coal swamps, hunting fish and giant insects. It moved with a side-to-side gait, bending its spine, a movement pattern inherited from the swimming motion of fish. When you see a lizard walk today or a salamander, you are seeing that ancient, undulating rhythm. Left, right, left, right. The spine curves, the limbs follow. But the land was drying. The climate was changing. The continents were drifting together to form the supercontinent Pangaea. The center of Pangaea was vast and arid. The swamps were shrinking. To survive in the dry interior, life needed a spacesuit, a way to carry the ocean with it. The solution was the amniotic egg. This was one of the greatest inventions in evolutionary history. The amniotic egg has a hard or leathery shell that keeps water in but lets air pass through. Inside, there are membranes. The amnion holds the embryo in a private pool of fluid. The yolk sac provides food. The allantois stores waste. It is a self-contained life support system, a portable pond. With the egg, animals were free. They could leave the water behind. They could walk into the desert. They could climb the mountains. The reptiles had risen. These early reptiles and their relatives, the synapsids, the ancestors of mammals, spread across Pangaea. One of the most famous creatures of this time was Dimetrodon. You have likely seen it in toy sets, the lizard-like animal with the giant sail on its back. Dimetrodon was not a dinosaur. It was a synapsid. It was more closely related to us than to a T-Rex. That sail on its back was likely a solar panel. In the cool mornings of the Permian period, Dimetrodon would turn its side to the sun. The blood pumped through the sail would warm up, catching the heat. This allowed the animal to become active earlier than its prey. It was a slow, solar-powered lifestyle, basking, warming, hunting, sleeping. The Permian period ended with the Great Dying, a massive extinction event caused by volcanic eruptions in Siberia. It was a time of fire and ash. 90% of marine species and 70% of land species vanished. The world went quiet again. The forests died back. The seas became stagnant. But in the silence of the recovery, a new group of animals was beginning to stir. Small, agile bipedal archosaurs, the ancestors of the dinosaurs. They were waiting for their turn. The Triassic period dawned hot and dry. The survivors of the Great Dying were hardy, and slowly the world began to green again. The dinosaurs appeared around 230 million years ago. At first they were small, dog-sized predators darting through the scrub. But they had an advantage. Their legs were tucked underneath their bodies, not splayed out to the side like lizards. This made them efficient walkers. They could breathe and run at the same time. As the Jurassic period began, the climate became wetter. Lush forests of conifers, cycads, and ginkgos covered the land. Pangaea began to break apart, opening new seaways, bringing rain. And the dinosaurs grew and grew and grew. The sauropods, the longnecks, Diplodocus, Brachiosaurus, Apatosaurus. These are the animals that truly embody the sleepy science of this era. They were mountains of flesh. Some weighed as much as 10 elephants. They were the largest land animals to ever walk the earth. Imagine a herd of Diplodocus moving through a Jurassic plain. They do not run. They do not hurry. They move with a slow, hydraulic grace. Their pillar-like legs lift and fall with a rhythmic thud that can be felt through the ground for miles. Thud, thud, thud. They spend their entire lives eating. Their long necks are like cranes sweeping through the ferns and the tree branches. They do not chew their food. They do not have the teeth for it. They have simple peg-like teeth for raking leaves off branches. They swallow the vegetation whole. Inside their cavernous bellies, they have a fermentation vat. Bacteria break down the tough plant matter. It is a slow, churning process that generates heat. In fact, these animals were so big that their problem was not staying warm, but dumping heat. They were gigantotherms. Their sheer mass kept their body temperature stable. A diplodocus lived life in the slow lane. It grew fast as a baby, but as an adult, it was a fortress of calm. It had few predators. Who would attack a walking building? They likely slept standing up or perhaps dozing with their long necks resting on a low branch or coiled on the ground. A half-sleep, a digestion sleep, and while the giants grazed, another quiet revolution was happening in the skin of the smaller dinosaurs. Feathers. We used to think feathers were for flight, but we now know that feathers evolved long before birds flew. Many meat-eating dinosaurs, the theropods, were covered in downy fuzz. Tyrannosaurus rex ancestors had feathers. Velociraptor had feathers. Why? Warmth. Feathers are the ultimate insulation. They trap a layer of air against the skin. This suggests that dinosaurs were not cold-blooded reptiles sluggish and dependent on the sun. They were active. They generated their own heat. But feathers also served another purpose: display, softness, comfort. Imagine a small dinosaur, a Sinosauropteryx, curling up in a hollow log. It wraps its long, fuzzy tail around its nose. It fluffs up its downy coat. It is warm. It is safe. The evolution of birds is not a sudden jump off a cliff into the air. It is a slow, gradual accumulation of traits. First, the wishbone, then the hollow bones, then the three-fingered hand, then the feathers for warmth, then the feathers elongated on the arms for display, to wave at a mate. Then the realization that these long arm feathers provided lift when running or jumping. Then the glide, and finally the powered flap. Archaeopteryx, the famous fossil from Germany, is a snapshot of this moment. It has the teeth and tail of a dinosaur, but the wings of a bird. It is a bridge, a frozen moment in the drift. But for millions of years, birds were just a small part of the ecosystem. They flitted in the shadows of the giants. They chattered in the branches of the Araucaria trees, while the Brachiosaurus browsed below. The world of the dinosaurs lasted for 160 million years. That is an incomprehensible amount of time. Humans have been around for maybe 300,000 years. Civilization maybe 10,000. The dinosaurs lived thousands of times longer than we have. They rose, they diversified, they adapted. They lived through changes in climate, through the breakup of continents. It was a golden age of life, a stability of giants. But the sky holds surprises, and the drift of space is not always gentle. 66 million years ago, a day like any other in the Cretaceous period, the sun rose over the tropical forests of what is now Mexico. Pterosaurs glided on the thermals, Triceratops browsed on the palms, and then a second sun appeared in the sky. A rock 10 kilometers wide moving at 20 kilometers per second. It slammed into the Yucatan Peninsula. The impact was catastrophic. But we are not here for the noise. We are here for the silence that followed. The dust, the ash, the smoke from the wildfires. It rose up into the atmosphere and circled the globe. It blocked out the sun. The earth fell into darkness. Photosynthesis stopped. The plants withered. The herbivores, the great giants, starved. The carnivores followed. The reign of the dinosaurs ended in the cold and the dark. But life did not end. In the undergrowth, in the burrows, in the hollows of rotting trees, there were survivors. Small creatures, mammals. They looked like shrews or badgers. They were furry, they were warm-blooded, and they had a superpower. They could sleep. Not just the nightly sleep, but the deep sleep. Torpor, hibernation. When the food ran out and the world got cold, the mammals didn't have to keep eating. They could lower their internal thermostat. They could slow their heart rate from hundreds of beats per minute to just a few. They could curl up in a ball, deep underground, and wait. Hibernation is a miracle of physiology. It is a state of suspended animation. The body consumes its own fat reserves very slowly. The immune system powers down. The brain waves flatten out. While the dinosaurs died on the freezing surface, the mammals slept in the warm earth. They dreamt, if they dreamt, of a world that would be theirs when they woke up. Birds also survived, the small ground-dwelling birds. They too could fluff up their feathers to stay warm. They could scavenge on seeds, those time capsules we spoke of earlier, that were still edible even after the plants had died. The darkness lasted for months, perhaps years. But eventually the dust settled. The sun broke through the gray clouds. The world that was revealed was empty, silent. The giants were gone. Their bones were already beginning to be covered by the silt that would turn them into stone. But the ferns were uncurling their fiddleheads from the rhizomes that had survived underground. The seeds were sprouting, and the mammals poked their noses out of their burrows. They sniffed the air. The Cenozoic era had begun, the age of mammals. In this new world, mammals exploded in diversity. They grew larger to fill the empty niches left by the dinosaurs. Some became grazers, some became hunters, some climbed the trees, and some looked at the water and decided to go back. This brings us to one of the most soothing evolutionary stories of all: the whale. The ocean calls to life. It is the cradle. The salt in our blood mimics the salt of the ancient seas. About 50 million years ago, in the region that is now Pakistan and India, a small animal lived near the water. Indochus. It looked like a tiny deer or a chevrotain. It was about the size of a raccoon. It was a vegetarian, but it spent a lot of time in the water. Maybe it hid in the water to escape predators like the modern mouse deer does. Its bones were dense and heavy, which helped it walk on the bottom of the river without floating up. Over millions of years, the descendants of Indochus became more aquatic. Pachycetus. Ambulocetus. Ambulocetus means the walking whale. It looked like a furry crocodile. It had webbed feet and a powerful tail. It could walk on land, but it was clumsy. In the water, it was graceful. The transition continued. The hind legs grew smaller and smaller. The front legs turned into paddles. The tail developed a fluke, a horizontal fin for powerful propulsion. The nostrils began a long migration. In Pachycetus, the nose was at the tip of the snout. In later ancestors, it moved up the face. Slowly, generation by generation, the nose drifted until it reached the very top of the head. The blowhole. This allowed the whale to breathe without lifting its head out of the water. It could cruise just below the surface, a seamless integration of air and sea. They lost their fur. Blubber, a thick layer of fat, became their warmth. It streamlined their bodies, smoothing out the rough edges of the land-dweller shape. And they changed the way they slept. Breathing for a whale is voluntary. They have to think to breathe. If they fell completely asleep, they would drown. So they evolved unihemispheric slow-wave sleep. It sounds technical, but it is beautiful. A whale sleeps with only half of its brain at a time. The left hemisphere sleeps while the right hemisphere stays awake to watch for danger and control breathing. Then they switch. They can sleep while swimming. They can sleep while nursing. They can sleep while drifting in the deep blue. Imagine a sperm whale. They sometimes sleep vertically, great pillars of flesh hanging motionless in the water column, suspended in the blue twilight. A cathedral of silence. They drift, they breathe, they dream with half a mind. The ocean offers a kind of peace that the land cannot. The water supports the body. Gravity is negated. A blue whale can grow to 30 meters long, weighing nearly 200 tons. It is the largest animal to have ever lived, bigger than any dinosaur. Its heart is the size of a small car. It beats only a few times a minute when it dives. Boom, boom, boom. A slow, heavy rhythm in the dark. To be a whale is to be a master of the slow drift. They migrate thousands of miles, singing songs that travel through the deep sound channel of the ocean. These songs can last for 20 minutes and can be heard across entire ocean basins. Low, moaning frequencies, the voice of the deep. Let us remain in the cool, dark waters for a while longer. We have watched the whales lose their legs and gain the ocean. But there was another transformation, even slower, even more profound, that took place within the mouths of giants. The early whales were hunters. They had sharp, serrated teeth. They chased fish and squid. But the ocean is vast, and chasing prey costs energy. There is a simpler, quieter way to eat if one has the patience for it. Millions of years ago, a lineage of whales began to change their diet. Instead of hunting a single fish, they began to hunt clouds. Clouds of krill. Tiny shrimp-like creatures that swarm in the millions in the cold, nutrient-rich waters near the poles. To catch a cloud, you do not need teeth. You need a sieve. Slowly, the teeth of these whales were lost. In their place, the roof of the mouth began to grow thick, keratinous plates, the same material as your fingernails, the same material as the hair of a sloth. These plates grew down in ragged, hairy curtains. This is baleen. Imagine the mechanism. It is a slow, hydraulic rhythm. The blue whale opens its mouth. The jaw unhinges, expanding the throat pleats, grooves of skin that run from the chin to the belly button. The mouth becomes a cavern, vast enough to hold a swimming pool of water. The whale swims forward. Water and krill flood in. The mouth closes. The tongue, a muscle weighing as much as an elephant, pushes up. The water is forced out through the baleen plates. The water escapes, but the krill are trapped in the hairy fringe. Then a swallow. This allowed whales to grow to sizes that land animals can only dream of. Gravity on land limits size. Eventually, legs would break. But in the water, buoyancy carries the weight. The blue whale, the fin whale, the humpback. They are the gentle giants of the drift. They live in a world of sound. Light does not penetrate deep into the ocean. Below 200 meters, the world is a twilight blue. Below 1,000 meters, it is absolute black. In this darkness, sound is sight. Whales use echolocation and low-frequency calls to map their world. A low moan from a blue whale can travel for thousands of miles through the deep sound channel, a layer of water where the temperature and pressure create a tunnel for sound waves. Imagine that sound, a vibration so low you feel it in your chest more than you hear it with your ears. It travels across entire ocean basins, connecting whales separated by continents of water. It is a slow conversation across the abyss. I am here. Where are you? And when they die, they return to the slow cycle of the earth in a process called a whale fall. A whale dies and sinks. It drifts down, spiraling slowly through the water column. It hits the abyssal plain, the flat, muddy bottom of the deep sea. There, in the freezing dark, the whale becomes an ecosystem for decades. First, the scavengers come, then the worms, then the bacteria. A single whale carcass provides as much food to the deep sea floor as thousands of years of marine snow, the falling organic debris from the surface. It is an oasis of life in a desert of darkness. It is a slow release of energy, borrowed from the sun-soaked surface, given back to the deep. While the whales were returning to the water, the land was undergoing a makeover of its own. A change in color, a change in scent. For hundreds of millions of years, the land was green and brown. Ferns, conifers, mosses. The reproduction of plants was a matter of wind and luck. Trees released clouds of pollen into the air, hoping it would land on another tree of the same species. It was a wasteful, random process. But back in the Cretaceous, before the dinosaurs died, a new experiment began. The angiosperms, the flowering plants. The evolution of the flower is a story of seduction. A flower is a billboard. It is a flag waving in the landscape. It says to the insect world, "Come here, I have food." The first flowers were likely simple. Perhaps they looked like magnolias or water lilies. They were not pollinated by bees. Bees had not evolved yet. They were pollinated by beetles. Beetles are clumsy visitors. They crash into the flower, they chew on the petals, they eat the pollen. But as they blunder from flower to flower, they carry the genetic dust of life on their hard shells. This was the beginning of coevolution, a dance between two different species evolving together, shaping each other. As plants evolved nectar, sugar water to lure insects, the insects evolved long tongues to reach it. As plants evolved bright colors to stand out against the green, insects evolved eyes that could see those colors. Bees evolved from wasps. They abandoned the hunting lifestyle to become vegetarians, collecting pollen to feed their larvae. They became fuzzy, the better to catch the pollen grains. This relationship changed the appearance of the planet. Imagine a meadow 100 million years ago. It is starting to speckle with color. Whites, yellows, and eventually the complex blues and purples. The flowers developed guides, lines on their petals visible only in ultraviolet light, that act like runway lights for bees, pointing them to the center, to the nectar. And with flowers came fruit. Before flowering plants, seeds were mostly naked or hidden in hard cones. But the angiosperms began to wrap their seeds in flesh. Sweet, sugary, colorful flesh. They invited animals to eat them. "Eat me," the apple says. "Take my fruit, but carry my seeds in your gut and deposit them far away with a pile of fertilizer." This created a web of dependency. The bird needs the berry needs the bird. The forest moves seed by seed in the stomachs of flying creatures. This explosion of flowering plants, the angiosperm radiation, provided the energy base for the mammals to thrive. Fruit is high energy. Nectar is high energy. It fueled the high metabolisms of the warm-blooded survivors, and it added a new layer of sensory experience to the world. Scent, the perfume of a jasmine vine, the smell of a pine forest warmed by the sun. The scent is a chemical signal, a volatile compound drifting on the breeze meant for a moth or a bat. But we, the bystanders, get to enjoy the calm intoxication of the garden. As the climate cooled in the Cenozoic era, the tropical forests began to shrink. The air became drier, the rain became less predictable. In the interiors of the continents, a new type of plant seized the opportunity. It was humble, it was tough, it was grass. Grass is a miracle of engineering. Unlike a tree or a bush which grows from its tips, grass grows from its base down near the ground. This means you can cut it, burn it, or eat it, and it will grow back. Around 25 million years ago, the grasslands began to spread. The steppe, the prairie, the veldt, the savanna. These were vast open oceans of green and gold rippling in the wind. The sound of the wind in the tall grass is one of the most soothing white noises of nature. Shh, shh. A constant gentle hushing. The spread of grass created a new challenge for animals. Grass is hard to eat. It is full of silica, microscopic bits of glass, that the plant uses for structure and defense. If you chew grass all day, it sands your teeth down to the gums. So the animals evolved. The horses, which started as small dog-sized creatures hiding in the forests, moved out onto the plains. They grew larger, their legs lengthened for running in the open, and their teeth changed. They developed hypsodont teeth, high-crowned teeth that extend deep into the jawbone. As the top of the tooth wears away from grinding the gritty grass, the tooth slowly erupts, pushing up more material. It is a tooth built to last a lifetime of wear. And then, there were the ruminants. The cows, the antelope, the sheep, the deer. They developed one of the most relaxing behaviors in the animal kingdom: chewing the cud. To digest grass, which is full of tough cellulose, you need time and help. A ruminant has a 4-chambered stomach. They graze quickly, tearing up the grass and swallowing it into the first chamber, the rumen. There, billions of bacteria and protozoa get to work, fermenting the grass. When the animal is safe, when the heat of the day has passed, it lies down in the shade. It regurgitates a ball of partially digested grass. It chews it again, slowly, rhythmically, grinding it down to a pulp to extract every bit of nutrition. Watch a cow chewing its cud. The jaw moves in a steady circular motion. The eyes are often half closed. The breath is slow. It is a picture of meditative calm, a state of biological mindfulness. This fermentation process releases heat, keeping the animal warm from the inside. It allows them to survive on food that other animals cannot touch. The grasslands created the great herds, the migration of the wildebeest, the thundering of the bison, millions of animals moving together, a river of life flowing across the plains following the rain. But in the tall grass, predators were also changing. Cats, the ancestors of lions, leopards, and saber-tooths. They became stealthy. They developed padded paws to move silently. They developed camouflage coats of tawny gold to blend in with the dry stems. The catnap is famous for a reason. Predators like lions sleep for 20 hours a day. They hunt in short bursts of high energy, and then they collapse. They sprawl on their backs, paws in the air, completely relaxed. They can afford to sleep deeply because they are at the top of the food chain. They have no fear. While the horses ran on the plains and the whales swam in the deep, a different story was unfolding in the canopy of the remaining forests. The story of the primates. Our story. It began with small, shrew-like creatures scrambling in the branches. But life in the trees requires a specific set of tools. You cannot fall. Gravity is the enemy. To survive, these early primates evolved hands, not paws with claws, but hands with grasping fingers. They developed a thumb that could touch the other fingers, the opposable thumb. This allowed them to grip a branch, to hold a fruit, to groom a partner. Along with the grip came a change in the skin. Claws retreated and became flat fingernails. This exposed the soft, sensitive pads of the fingertips. Look at your own fingertips. See the tiny ridges, the fingerprints. These ridges increase friction, helping with grip, but they are also dense with nerve endings. This was the beginning of a tactile world, a world felt through touch, the texture of bark, the smoothness of a leaf, the warmth of another's skin. As primates relied more on their hands, their reliance on smell decreased. The long snout of the shrew shortened. The face became flatter, the eyes moved. In most animals, eyes are on the sides of the head to scan for predators. But primates needed to judge distance. To jump from branch to branch requires precise depth perception. So the eyes rotated forward. Their fields of view overlapped, stereoscopic vision. 3D vision. This change came with a cost, a blind spot behind the head. But it gave clarity to the world in front. The primates became social. Living in groups, troops provided safety. Many eyes are better than two, and in these groups a new behavior evolved that is central to the feeling of safety and sleepiness. Social grooming. Watch a troop of macaques or baboons. They spend hours sitting together. One picks through the fur of another. They remove dirt, parasites, dry skin. But it is not just hygiene. It is a massage. The rhythmic stroking releases endorphins, natural opiates in the brain of both the groomer and the groomee. It lowers the heart rate. It reduces stress hormones. It builds bonds of trust. I will clean your back and you will clean mine. We are friends. We are safe. This need for touch, for rhythmic soothing, is deep in our evolutionary history. It is why we rock babies to sleep. It is why a massage feels so good. It is a biological echo of the troop sitting safely in the tree while the dangerous world passes by on the ground below. We are approaching the recent history of the Earth, the last 2.5 million years. The Pleistocene epoch. This era is defined by a rhythm of cold and warm. The Ice Ages. Due to slight wobbles in the Earth's orbit and tilt, the Milankovitch cycles, the amount of sunlight hitting the northern hemisphere fluctuates over thousands of years. These fluctuations act as a trigger. A cool summer fails to melt the winter snow. The snow builds up. White snow reflects sunlight, cooling the Earth further. The ice sheets grow. They crept down from the Arctic. Mile-thick glaciers bulldozed the continents. They covered Canada, northern Europe, parts of Russia. They locked up so much water that the sea levels dropped by over 100 meters. Land bridges appeared. Britain was connected to Europe. Siberia was connected to Alaska. Indonesia was connected to Malaysia. The world became a place of dry, cold steppes. The mammoth steppe. Woolly mammoths, woolly rhinos, cave bears. These animals evolved thick coats of fur and layers of fat to survive the long, dark winters. And among them walked a new kind of primate, the genus Homo. We had come down from the trees long before, standing upright on the African savannas. Bipedalism, walking on two legs, was an efficient way to travel long distances. It freed our hands for carrying. But the real revolution was fire. We do not know exactly when humans first controlled fire, perhaps 1 million years ago, perhaps earlier. But imagine the first night a group of early humans slept around a campfire. Before fire, the night was a time of fear. Predators saw better in the dark than we did. We had to hide, to climb cliffs, to sleep lightly. Fire changed the night. It pushed back the darkness. It kept the predators at bay. For the first time, humans could sleep deeply on the ground. We could enter REM sleep, the stage of dreaming, more safely and for longer periods than other primates. Some scientists believe this high-quality sleep allowed our brains to grow, to reorganize, to become more complex. The campfire became the center of the world. The hearth. Staring into a fire is a hypnotic experience. The flickering light, the warmth, the crackle of the wood. It triggers a deep relaxation response. It is a genetic memory of safety. Around the fire, we cooked our food. Cooking is essentially pre-digestion. It breaks down tough fibers and proteins, making them easier to digest and allowing us to extract more calories with less effort. This freed up energy for our hungry brains. And around the fire, we told stories. We shared knowledge. The wisdom of the elders was passed to the young in the quiet hours of the night. The drift of language, the drift of culture. We have arrived at the present moment. You, lying here listening to this voice, you are the product of 4.5 billion years of drifting, surviving, and sleeping. You carry the dust of the stars in your bones. You carry the salt of the ancient oceans in your blood. You carry the mitochondria of the first symbiosis in your cells. You carry the tailbone of the primate in your spine. You are a museum of evolutionary history. But evolution has not stopped. It is still happening. It is just too slow to see. Our wisdom teeth are disappearing, jaw sizes are changing. We are still adapting to our environment even as we change the environment around us. And the Earth itself continues its slow movements. The plates are still moving. The Atlantic Ocean is getting wider by about 2 centimeters every year. The speed at which your fingernails grow. In 50 million years, Africa will collide with Europe, closing the Mediterranean Sea and creating a new mountain range higher than the Himalayas. In 250 million years, the continents may drift back together to form a new supercontinent. Pangaea Proxima, a new vast interior desert, a new global ocean. The cycle continues. And looking even further ahead, deep, deep into the future, the sun will slowly grow brighter and hotter. In 1 billion years, the oceans will begin to evaporate. The era of complex life on Earth will eventually draw to a close. The planet will return to a silent, hot, microbial world, much like it was in the Archean. But that is a long, long way off. A time scale that makes our worries seem smaller than a single grain of sand. For now, the Earth is hospitable. It is lush. It is filled with the sounds of wind and water and breath. There is a comfort in knowing that we are part of this immense flow. We do not have to control it. We are just riding the wave of deep time. The stress of today is just a flicker in the timeline. The anxiety of the moment is just a ripple on the surface of a mile-deep ocean. Beneath the ripple, the water is calm. Beneath the noise, the silence of the bedrock remains. So let us return to the immediate rhythm. The rhythm of your breath. In and out. The rhythm of your heart. Beat, beat, beat. These are the rhythms of the first cells. The rhythms of the jellyfish. The rhythms of the sleeping dinosaur. The rhythms of the whale in the deep. You are safe in this long chain of life. You have done enough for today. Evolution has worked for billions of years to bring you to this moment of rest. You have earned this sleep. Drift away now. Drift into the deep time of dreams. The stars are turning overhead. The Earth is spinning. The galaxy is moving through the void, and you are still. Good night.